Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Washington County Public Affairs Forum on Monday, April 6th. Today we have a wonderful program, and just before we get started, as people are eating and getting their stuff served, remember, we have really great service people here. Don't forget to tip on the way out. And you know, one of the benefits of this job of being president of the forum, I get to remind all of you people that have yet to donate to the forum. Remember, we've got a matching grant until the end of the end of June. So whatever you give will get doubled up to a $3,500 amount. So let's go. Those of you who haven't supported us yet, there's still room. We still have room for matching donations. Folks, today we're going to learn about the Hillsboro Airport. Our guest speaker today is Stephen Nagy with the Port of Portland, General Aviation's Manager, and there'll be some opportunity for forum members to ask questions. And ladies and gentlemen, without further comment, looking for Mr. Nagy. Then there'll be further comment because Mr. Nagy is in the room, but he's not in the room. I'm sure he'll be here in a matter of seconds. And honestly, I know you want me to sing, but trust me, I have a terrible voice, so I will not sing. Stop asking, please. I will not sing. I could talk again about the donation aspect. I could make the first official public announcement, that since 1956, this organization has not had a paid employee. We are in a position to have one part-time. And for those of you that don't know, Mr. Eric Squires is our part-time executive director, and we're all very pleased to have him. We're looking forward to some wonderful, wonderful opportunities for growth. And so as a matter of fact, Mr. Squires actually just came in, and you missed the applause, but they were for you. Okay, good. And does anybody see Mr. Nagy?
He's outside doing an interview with Channel 6.
Okay. Well, you know, as a matter of fact, one of the things we've talked about is the opportunity to network here. And because there's a TV interview going on, and you know, the forum isn't a national network, it isn't even a local network, if everybody would go around the room just real quick and just say who they are and why you're here, what you're interested in today, that'd be really cool, and I think the timing would work. If we could ask John to start.
John Blackman, and I'm interested in the Hillsboro Airport noise, and I can't figure out if it's a bunch of sore heads or is it really an issue.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll learn. Next, ma'am, you are?
I am Helen Bowler from Cincinnati, and I'm visiting with my
Cool.
here.
Excellent. Cincinnati. Cool.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome.
I'm Winona Bodine, and I belong with him.
Okay.
John Williams, I'm the forum board, and I'm interested in all the programs the forum brings because I think they're all good.
And you might have something to do with them all being good too. And that lovely lady next to you is?
I'm Marilyn McWilliams, and I'm on the board of Valley Water District, and I'm just always interested in anything going on in Washington County.
Thank you.
I'm Al Falcone, and since I moved to Oregon in 2003, I joined the Washington County Public Affairs Forum, and my reason for being here is to keep up with current events and different business interests in the area, and also I'm interested in the political scene.
Cool, thank you.
Phil Nelson, Forum Secretary, and interested in current affairs.
Thank you, Phil. Sir?
Brad Lundberg. Lived here about 30 years, about 2 miles south of the Hillsboro Airport. Noticed a big increase in noise since about last July. And so I'm just here to find out, is it going to get better, going to get worse? Just kind of want to know what's going on.
Excellent. You came to the right place, especially today. Thank you, sir.
I'm Clyde Wolf, and your newest member right now.
All right. Yay. See, I told you we're growing, and there's proof. Thank you, sir.
And I'm here because of Eric.
Okay,
He
great.
told me to.
Yes, he often gets his way, doesn't he? Sir?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Daniel Vasquez. I've been here in Washington County for a little bit over 3 years, been involved doing lots of stuff. And I'm always interested in things that are going on here. But I'm also a candidate for the Beaverton School Board. in the coming May election, so, thank you.
Danny will be up here with other folks in 2 weeks, I believe. We'll be talking about the Beaverton School District. And, sir?
I'm Anthony Mills, the treasurer of the organization, so if you'd like to become a member, we have some membership forms over there. It's $45 a year, and that allows you to ask questions of our speakers throughout the season. Also, we have an anonymous donor who is willing to match contributions. We've had a number of people, both officers and regular members, who have donated. So if you want to donate, we're a nonprofit. You can write it off on your taxes. You can see me, and I'll gladly accept your donations.
Yes, he will. And he'll also gladly give you a receipt.
Yes.
Sir, next to you.
I'm Spencer Ehrman. I live in South Beaverton, and I come here because I'm interested in things going on in Washington County.
Thank you.
I'm Harry Boudin, Cedar Hill, same reason.
Thank you.
I'm John Tyner. I just been here for 33 years. I just can't break the habit.
That's why we keep him on the board. Ma'am.
I'm Sally Bonnell, and I've been coming for a very long time because I always like to see the people that are contributing to our district.
Thank you, Sally.
I'm Rod Bonnell, and I just come along to see what's going on.
I'm Emily Neff. I'm an attorney in Hillsboro, and I keep a close eye on the airport too.
Thanks, Emily.
Okay, and I'm Esther McKelton, and I am now past president of our group, and I've been interested, as always, in what's going on in our area, so sounds good.
Excellent. Sir
McAlpin, interest in what's going on with our county.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
Jim Cape, Cedar Hills.
Yes, understood.
I'm this is my first meeting here. I just joined. I am.
Yes. I believe you've overtaken the gentleman who thought he was our newest member. Now, come on now. Right now she's in the lead. We've got to get somebody else to take. Just kidding, Mickey. Welcome, and I'm glad you're here.
I am a founding member and president of Oregon Aviation Watch. We really focus on protecting the environment and livability from the excesses of aviation.
Cool. Sir?
Hi, I'm Mike Riley. I mostly come just on Christmas and Easter. I live in Cedar Hill, and I have a business in Cedar Hills. We do research, market research, and opinion polling. And we've done some work for the board as well.
Happy Easter, Mike.
I'm Bill Kroger, a relatively new novelist. I'm civic-minded, and I find that the forums are a good way to keep informed about things.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Leslie, and I believe in free speech, and I love the questions I get to ask.
And we have come to expect good ones from you, sir, for a reason. Ma'am.
I'm Maureen Wong, and I come because you have good topics, and I need to know what's going on in Washington County.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, fresh from being hopefully well treated by the media, Stephen Nagy with the Port of Portland, please.
Thank you very much. Let me pull up my presentation here and get out my glasses. This is one of my recent concessions to turning 50, wearing glasses. Again, thanks for the introduction. My name is Steve Nagy. I'm the Port of Portland's General Aviation Airports Manager. As most people are familiar, the Port of Portland owns PDX. I'm sure everybody's flown in and out through there over the years. What people are less familiar with is we also own the two airports, one in Hillsboro, one in Troutdale, and we also own 4 marine terminals. I think most people are familiar with that, as well as 5 business parks across the region. So the topic of today, I kind of wanted to talk about some of the sustainability issues associated with our general aviation airports, Hillsboro in particular. Cover some of the economics, some of the social issues associated with the airports, and also some of the environmental issues associated with the airports. I will start off by kind of giving an overview of the port and kind of our role in the greater region as well as across the state of Oregon. Many times people, they refer to us as the Port of Portland, but the reality is in a lot of ways we're the Port of Oregon, because Eastern Oregon, people ship their wheat products through us. Southern Oregon, manufacturing products all go through us, both imports and exports. So in a lot of ways we are the Port of Oregon. So the mission of the port, again, this is our statutory mission, or actually our mission is to enhance the region's economy and quality of life by providing efficient cargo and air passenger access to national and global markets. I'm sorry, it's not our statutory, but that's a mission that we've set for ourselves. You can see the port has had quite a level of activity, and that is no longer the way we are doing business there. I had pointed out there are properties. This is kind of an overview of some of our facilities. As I mentioned, we have the 3 airports, Portland International, Hillsboro, and Troutdale. We have the 4 marine terminals at Terminal 2, 4, 5, and 6, and then the industrial parks at Rivergate, Rivergate, Swan Island, Troutdale, Reynolds, and Gresham Vista industrial parks. So the economic impact of port-related activity, this is not just of what we do ourselves, but this is businesses that as they that are connected with ports activities or that use our facilities, that ship through us, any number of those things. There are about a little over 26,000 related jobs in the local region that are directly related to port activity. There's about 1.7 billion in personal income activity associated with that, whether you're talking aviation, marine, or the industrial parks, and that includes the warehousing and distribution associated with those industrial parks. There's about 4.6 billion in business-related activity. Again, that's across all 3 lines of our business: industrial parks, marine terminals, as well as aviation. There's about 164 million generated in local taxes from the businesses associated with all of that activity that directly go into the metropolitan Tri-County area. So this actually is, what I want to cover today, again, like I said, is specifically related to our 2 airports, but mainly related to Hillsboro Airport, is our sustainability initiatives and sustainability policy associated with that. And so the ports, our policy is the port's actions affect and influence the lives of future generations and the environment where we live and work. We operate sustainably when we make business decisions that support economic health, integrate community concerns, and reflect a deep and broad commitment to environmental stewardship for the benefit of the future generations. And I will leave that there, and I will come back to it and certainly answer questions about that. But what I wanted to start off with was, how many people were around the community in about 1980 or so, in that vicinity, in that time frame, in that era? This is actually an aerial photo of Hillsboro Airport at that time, and if you take enough time and you can see, if you're that far away, or if you want to come up and look at it later, there's quite a few features that are in the community now that are not on this slide in 1980, just 35 years ago. There's no Brookwood Parkway. There's no areas directly east of Brookwood, the whole campus on that side. Most of the residential communities on the west side of the airport. There's no Intel campus there on 25th Avenue, and very little development up along Evergreen Road. How many people remember the population or know the population of Hillsboro in 1980, roughly?
40,000.
It was, yeah, I want to say it was closer to 30, I believe, or something like that. Yeah, like 30, yeah, right around 30,000. This photo is just from 5 years ago. In fact, it might be 1 or 2 years newer, but I took liberty. This is for illustrative purposes. 30 years later, 30 years on. There is Brookwood Parkway. There is industrial development both to the west and the east. There's been greater residential infill to the south, the west, the east of the airport. Brookwood Parkway has gone through. Intel's campuses on the west and the east side. And a fair amount of development there on residential both east and west, as well as commercial along Cornell, the area of the Costco and those types of things. Does anybody know what the population of Hillsboro was in the 2010 census?
92, 90,000?
I think it was like 92, 93,000, something like that. So the reason we illustrate this is we are a relatively large airport that's been in a community that has been developing and essentially tripling in its size in 3 decades. The city of Hillsboro roughly went up 300 and some percent in its population. Many people ask, how big was the airport back in 1980? Well, back in 1980, it was doing about 180,000 takeoffs and landings at that time. And right now, we are doing, this past year, we did a little over 224,000 operations. So the airport has certainly grown over time, but the community that has certainly surrounded us has certainly taken off and grown over time as well. And it's partly the reason to show this is it's our responsibility to try as best as possible, while the city tries to infill and develop around us, to do that with them in partnership and do that in the most sustainable way to move forward that is best for the economics of the community, is best for the social aspects of the community, as well as hopefully try to be as cognizant and as good for the environment as we can be. So I start here with just some background about the airport itself. We're approximately 900 acres in size. Not all of that is in the city. There's a fair portion of our land that lies north of Evergreen Road. It's actually in the unincorporated parts of Washington County at this time still. We are a full-service general aviation airport. We are one of only few airports in the state of Oregon that has an FAA air traffic control tower. Most people are familiar, not every airport has an air traffic control facility, and not every air traffic control facility is actually owned and operated by the federal government. They actually contract for quite a few of them. Ourselves, PDX, Eugene and Medford are the major FAA towers. Places like Salem, Corvallis, Troutdale, Redmond, those are all contracted facilities to the FAA. We have an instrument landing system, so essentially pilots can land in all weather, all time of the year. And we have some of the latest precision navigation approaches that allow pilots to use essentially GPS types navigation equipment to allow them to land in all weather conditions. We have approximately 360 based business jets, or 360 based aircraft, excuse me. Yeah. About 40 of those are business jets based at Hillsboro Airport. There's about 30 helicopters. There's about 20 aviation businesses on the airport itself. And in last year, we did, like I said, about 222,000 takeoffs and landings, which was about a 2.8% growth over the previous year. And that puts us by volume, by number of takeoffs and landings, that puts Hillsboro Airport as the second largest airport in the state by volume, behind PDX. That's ahead of other airports like Eugene. And that's really due to both the operations of the flight training school as well as the business community that flies in and out of there.
Do you guys have TSA there?
No, when you fly on a charter type aircraft, the TSA has screening for those passengers that they require the companies that provide charter services to do, but that is not with specific agents, but it's a program that they have that is required for them to have manifests for those folks that are going to be on their charter aircraft. In 2005, so about 10 years ago, we did a master plan effort for it, and as those of you that are familiar with most municipalities, whether you're talking about the city or the county, they do long-range forecasting to try and see what kind of facilities are going to be necessary over the coming decades. Do you have enough of them? And at what points would you trigger the development of those? And so in 2005, we completed a little over a 2-year process of our last master plan. One of the questions that we wanted to answer was, what is the role of this airport going to be? And what we kind of answered was the airport will remain a general aviation facility. There is some long-term potential for small commercial aviation, something like Horizon or something like that coming in, or if those of you who've been to Seattle are familiar with something like Kenmore Air, 9-seater or so type aircraft. We've yet to see that develop in the last 10 years. It's not something we actively go out and market for. Our belief is that PDX is the commercial service airport of the region, but we have had other entities come to us from time to time and ask about that. Based on aircraft and operations, we expect a growth rate of about 1% over the next, say, a dozen, or actually another 10 years from now. The master plan looked at a 20-year horizon. And then in that time frame, new infrastructure and facilities would be necessary to meet that demand. Here's where we were at that time frame when we completed it. As you can see, operations at a general aviation airport don't go up in a linear fashion. They are tied to the economy. You can see it around 2008. We took a large dip as a result of the recession. It's flattened out there for a few years. It dipped again until we recovered, but you can see now we're into about 3 years of recovery. We're back up to about 222,000 operations, and we continue to see that go up at about, like I said, a 1 to 2% per year type of calculation. I thought I'd just cover some of the activity that goes on at the airport. We have 3 fixed base operators. Is anybody familiar with what that term is? So a fixed base operator is kind of a one-stop shopping. If you own an aircraft or you want services for your aircraft, or you fly in, or you've chosen yourself to go out and buy your own aircraft, they will provide hangars, they will provide pilots, they can provide maintenance and fuel and all those types of things for your aircraft. Most airports are lucky to have one. We actually have 3. AeroAir, Global Aviation, and Hillsboro Aviation. We have local corporate flight departments for Nike, Columbia Sportswear, and other companies. Hillsboro, actually I need to update this slide. Flight training is now being done by 2 flight schools there, Hillsboro Aero Academy, and I'm drawing a blank on the other one, but we have 2 flight schools at the airport right now. We also have aeromedical services. That is both a combination of local life flight type activities, and that's not the life flight, your helicopter life flight, but that is somebody who is an injured patient, say in Medford, or needs transport to Portland for that. They will actually take fixed-wing aircraft and transport that person here, maybe for a special procedure, maybe for a burn unit, those types of things. The other services they have are some companies, if you work overseas, and you are sick overseas and you want to be brought back to the U.S. for medical treatment, they actually essentially have air ambulances that will provide transport of a patient from a third country back to the U.S. for your hospitalization. And so there's one company there at Hillsboro has a fleet of these jets that they operate all the way into Europe and all the way into Asia to bring patients back if you work for a company and you're stationed overseas. Most people are familiar. I don't think it's a high, or I don't think this is a quiet thing that happens at the airport, so to speak, or an under wraps thing. Intel operates a corporate air shuttle service out of the airport on Monday through Friday type of activity. They operate from about 6 in the morning till about 8 p.m. I think is their last arrival flight. It operates between, I believe, 15 and 16 flights a day. I'll have to look at the exact number. They're essentially for their employees. They're not outfitted like a business jet. They're a 50-seat regional jet aircraft. So those of you that have flown on Horizon, it essentially looks like that. Their employees get on board. It's 2 on each side of the aisle. They have a flight attendant, and they fly from Hillsboro to the San Jose area, and then also down to the Phoenix, Arizona area for that. They find that that's highly effective for their business operations. So let me transition into some of these. Like I said, I want to talk about some of the, like I said, the sustainability programs of the airport. So I want to highlight some of the initiatives that we have. One of them being on the economic health. We'll start with economics first. The economic health of the airport and the impact to the local economy, there are about 1,200 jobs. This was from a 2013 study. We're undertaking this again right now in 2015, so these numbers may change by the end of the year. But we have about 1,200 jobs related to the airport. About 600 of them are direct jobs. Those are on airport. That's everything from the owners of the companies down to the aircraft mechanics, down to pilots, down to the flight students, and down to the instructors. There are about 300 what are called induced jobs in the community and about another 300 indirect. Indirect and induced jobs, you might want to be able to explain to us, but essentially they are jobs that are created in the community as a result of the activity on the facility itself. So if somebody has to buy a part or buy parts or buy from a supplier in Hillsboro or in Washington County, and that person has to put on another employee as a result of the activity of supporting a business at the airport, that's considered as part of that. Some of the other activities are in the hotel and leisure industry. If people fly in and they need to rent cars, or if they need a hotel, or if they go out for dinner, those are in a restaurant or a hotel puts on an additional staff person as a result of that level of activity. That's accounted for as well in those economic studies. There's about 75 or 76 million dollars in business revenue from those 20 on-airport aviation businesses. There's about 61 million in personal income for the employees associated with those 1,200 jobs. And there's about 5.6 million in taxes generated for local communities. And this last one here really is related to Intel. They tell us, and when we did this economics research before, and we'll do this again, there's about, and it's not just them, it's the other entities that use their corporate aircraft. There's about a $5.5 million savings to those companies in travel time costs for their local employees, not having to go to PDX, not having to wait to go through security, through TSA, to get on their own aircraft, have their own crew, and those types of things. It increases the productivity of those folks to be able to get to one place and maybe actually even return that same afternoon or evening. The economics of the airport, the health of that, this is where, and I don't mean to get too far into the weeds or details about this, but and I don't know how to do this without doing that. But the Port of Portland is, most people are familiar with when you pay your property tax bill, there's a little line in there that says you're paying a certain amount to the port, and it's usually a small amount in there. The Port of Portland is about 97% funded by the funds that are generated from the users of our facilities overall on a yearly basis. 3% of our revenue into the port comes from property tax bills. That revenue that comes from property taxes is used on things like the marine side of the port, those 4 marine terminals and the 5 industrial parks that I talked about. On the aviation side of the port, whether you're talking PDX, Hillsboro, or Troutdale, we are a self-sufficient entity. So what we charge our operators to operate at the airport is what we run off of. We essentially try to run ourselves like a private business. So without getting too far into this as well, this is kind of a roll-up of our financials from projected when we did this in 2013. We did an analysis and did a projection of revenues and expenses over the next 5-year period so that we could set rates for somebody. You need to know how to price your facilities. You need to know what you're going to spend on operating them so you can set your prices and your rates. So in that vein, the direct expenses of running the Hillsboro and Troutdale airports are in red. The indirect and the administrative expenses are in green. The purple is our capital. So the red and the green are what it takes to operate on a yearly basis. The purple is if we build something on, if we're building a facility or we're building a runway or we're rehabbing a runway or we're building a new building. Those are one-time expenses that have usually a 20-year lifespan or something like that, and you depreciate those. The blue line that runs through all that is actually our revenues. And so our goal is always to be our revenues have to cover our cost of operating on a yearly basis. And what you see from this is we generally don't cover the cost of all of our capital inputs on a yearly basis. Some of that is covered by grants that we get from the federal government. So if you fly on a flight out of PDX and you pay that ticket tax to your airline, that goes into a large pool that the federal government collects from all users of aviation system. And they spread that out to general aviation airports and commercial service airports. So that covers some of it. We took a one-time grant from Connect Oregon, which is Oregon lottery funded. We got a $4 million grant once to do that. The other is, if we can't get those kind of funds, we fall back on when you shop at PDX or when you park your car, the port is able to keep that revenue. So if there's a capital shortfall, we fall back on those as well for funds that we get out of those folks who use and fly through PDX. Not your airlines, but from the other types of things. So our goal is always to cover our operating and revenue, or our operating expenses with the revenue we generate. And the goal of that is you essentially have what we feel is a world-class business aviation airport in the backyard of Hillsboro, or in the front door really of Hillsboro, that is of no cost to the taxpayer of Hillsboro or Washington County, because it's not funded by that mechanism of that. One of our other things that we established after we completed that master plan was what's called HARE, or Hillsboro Airport Roundtable Exchange. It's a forum that meets on a quarterly basis of citizens, elected officials, and businesses associated with the airport. And we've been tackling issues like airport zoning. We've been tackling issues like unleaded fuel, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We've been tackling issues of noise and how to get out information associated with how aircraft fly to members in the community so they understand better how and where aircraft fly. One of those is we have what's called a fly-friendly program. And so we have these types of pieces of information that we put up on our website. We share these with pilots. We go to pilot forums and community groups and talk about this. Essentially, trying to get pilots to depart the airport to the north over the unincorporated parts of the county, the less populated areas. And some of the tenets of it are avoid low-level flying of the community, maintain runway heading until reaching the highest practical altitude, operations of the crosswind runway, which point towards downtown Hillsboro. We try and discourage that as much as possible. It's only used during the wind conditions when winds dictate it. And we really discourage touch-and-go operations, though we can't prohibit them. We discourage them after 10 p.m. and before 6 a.m. The problem with that is when you take those federal dollars, whether you're a community that's taking them to improve your public roads or you're taking them to improve your airport, with those come non-discriminatory clauses that say you can't discriminate against one operator versus the other. And to the FAA, noise is if you try to discriminate on one that says, I don't like you because you're louder than this, to their view, that is discriminatory the same way you would say, I don't like your trucking company to use this road versus that other person's. So as much as we may like to work with the community as well as with our operators, we try to get them to voluntarily do as many things as possible, but us mandatorily or unilaterally putting mandates in place, the federal government won't allow you to do that. Some of our environmental initiatives, so switching gears off of economics and into environmental. Most people have heard about aviation fuels and leaded still being an aviation fuel. That's correct. It's still part of what's called avgas. There's been a great reduction, and I don't think anybody would dispute this, in the amount of airborne emissions of lead and other contaminants associated with that. Mainly been through the reduction of lead from automobile fuels. This being one of the last sources of fuels that are that still contain lead. Essentially, the FAA, the pilots groups, this is a national issue. It's not just a local issue associated with this airport. Every airport that has aircraft at it has this issue associated with it. It finally got the attention of the FAA at the federal level, as well as both the pilots associations and pilots groups at the nationwide level. They finally agreed to a transition plan, or what they're calling the Unleaded Avgas Transition Plan, that the FAA has in place to have a replacement fuel for leaded fuel by 2018. Right now, they are on track with their process. Their first thing was to poll fuel providers like Shell Oil and those to see if they would actually be able to develop a blended fuel that could be dropped in and replace this fuel that aircraft use without any damage or any associated crossover associated with it. They've gotten past that kind of proposal stage, and they're actually into the first phase, a one-year phase of testing right now. They will complete that next summer and move into the one-year actually operational testing phase after that. They have 4 fuels by 3 different suppliers that they are actually testing right now, with the goal, again, of having this rolled out and implemented by 2018 to actually finally remove this. The port, along with several others, Oregon Health Authority, Washington County Public Health, and the CPOs, we were invited to and we participated in. One of the CPOs sponsored a forum on this, was very informative about the extent of the issue associated with this. So we're continue to be engaged and happy to do that. HARE, our Airport Advisory Group, established a subcommittee of tenants, community, and business folks who wanted to explore this. We then, from their recommendation, we conducted a study to determine if there's a market, because some aircraft can use unleaded car gasoline today. Not all aircraft can, but some can. Depending on which pilot you talk to, there's a lot of variation. Some believe a lot can, some believe very few can. We spent some of our own money to do a study that our HARE helped us develop the scope to look at, in this area, Hillsboro, Western Washington County, Western Metro area, regionally, is there a market for unleaded car gasoline that pilots might use? And what our study essentially found was that roughly between, depending on which manufacturers of aircraft you look at, roughly 10 to 30% of current aircraft that are out there today could use unleaded car gasoline without any modification to their aircraft. Well, some could with modification, some can use it straight out of the box. And so what we're working with right now is, we talked about we have those 3 fixed base operators at the airport. Those are the suppliers of fuel. As the port, we don't actually own or operate any of the gas stations associated with it. We permit the businesses that are on the airport, but we don't actually own any of those. So it's a business decision if they choose to go into that. As part of this study, not only did we determine how big is the market, which we found is about 10 to 30%, we wanted to do a business case that said, okay, if you brought this product in, what would you need to sell it at? How could you market it? Who could you attract, and those types of things. So we've taken that to our 3 fuel providers, and we think we've got some that are interested in actually bringing this product in this interim period between now and 2018, and maybe capture as many as 10 to 30% of current operations to use an unleaded product, which is essentially a very similar, or it is unleaded car gasoline. It's just not blended with ethanol. I probably explained that in way too much detail, but so right now, like I said, we're working on attracting, and again, to kind of use some of the acronyms, pilots call that MoGas, or motor gasoline, essentially car gas. Avgas, for those of you to get the terms down, avgas is the actual leaded, the 100 octane low lead. And some of our environmental stewardship, I'll kind of transition into that now. And when we did construct our parallel runway, so we have now 2 runways next to each other at Hillsboro. One of them being the small new one. We didn't expand or do anything different with the length of the current runway, but we built a smaller 3,600-foot runway next to it. It had about almost 2 acres, 1.9 acres of unavoidable wetland impact. To mitigate for that, it was required by federal law to actually do that. And the FAA doesn't allow you to mitigate those wetlands on site because wetlands attract birds and airplanes don't mix, so we had to find somewhere else that we could do this. We actually partnered with Jackson Bottom Wetlands Preserve. I'm sure most people are familiar with Jackson Bottoms. We partnered with them. The FAA looked at that, great, it's 3.5 miles from the airport, so there's no interaction between aircraft and wildlife. It's in the same watershed for Hillsboro, which is one of the big things that the federal agencies require when you permit this. And there was no property acquisition required. They actually owned all the property, they just needed the funds and the horsepower to convert it back into wetlands from it had been had soil deposit on and became uplands. So the benefit for this project was it was habitat that was contiguous to their other wetlands, so waterfowl that are traveling up and down the west coast can certainly use it better. Reintroduced native species back to the site that had been filled over with all this soil, brought back wildlife habitat, and it helps with their water quality and flood storage. It allowed completion of a restoration project at the airport, or at the Jackson Bottoms. The site will be managed in perpetuity by them. Public access, so those of you can go out there, you can wander it now. It allowed Port and ODOT was another one of our partners in this because they had an interchange that they were fixing, to do this in advance of that. And it was cost savings for all of us. Jackson Bottoms didn't have to go out and raise funds for this. We were obligated to do this, and we could do this in a manner that the public could have access to at a later time. And I'll finally finish up on one last environmental thing. This is just real recent to us here. It's the Airport Carbon Accreditations Program through ACI, or Airports Council International. It's kind of the governing body of airports. In 2008, the port joined what's called the Climate Registry Program through Airports Council International. And what that did with us is we were required then, once we joined that, to do a greenhouse gas emissions inventory every year. And so we've done that since 2009. In 2009, we committed to reducing greenhouse gas across the entire organization. So we committed to this, reducing emissions levels by 15% below 1990 levels. We actually have already achieved that goal. We're 5 years ahead of that and achieved and surpassed that, and rolling back ours. That's of the activity that we can control. Aircraft that we don't fly aircraft, so that's not within the purview of that. The Carbon Accreditation Program, in 2014, Hillsboro Airport became the 5th airport in North America certified under their new Carbon Accreditation Program. We are behind Montreal, Victoria in Canada were the first two. SeaTac was the first in the US, and then PDX, Hillsboro, and Troutdale. We are the first three here. And I think a few other airports, SFO and LAX, are trying to actually get themselves into this program as well. Essentially, airports commit to reducing their carbon emissions from their operations with the ultimate goal of becoming carbon neutral. That's from the airport's operations, for what you control. So that's the heating, ventilation of the terminal buildings, the cars and things that are used to support all the baggage that goes back and forth on the airport. So far we've made substantial reductions through our purchase of renewable energy credits, up to 100% of our energy now. We've done lighting retrofits, HVAC system changeouts, and has resulted in a combined savings of 13,000 metric tons of carbon and 15 million kilowatts of electricity annually. So I will just conclude by saying our approach to conducting business is one that incorporates the policies, practices, and actions. And again, the performance, because one of the things we have to do is measure this. What are the performance metrics in consideration of economic, social, and environmental factors in everything we try to do with our operations. And with that, I will turn this back over to your president.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for questions. This has been a really great presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Nagy. And I think I should warn you, in case you're not aware, we usually find some very excellent questions here. Not necessarily tough, just good and well thought out ones. As a quick reminder, only paid up members of the forum can ask questions. If you have a burning question and you're not a paid up member, well, we do have applications. Folks, without further garbage from my mouth, let's see some intelligent stuff coming up. Mr. Nagy, the mic, sure. And you have your first question. Thank you.
My name is Bill Kroger. I'm a forum member. Thanks for coming today. I appreciate it. Thanks for your presentation. I have two quick questions. Neither pertain to Hillsboro. I was wondering what the schedule is with the carpet at the PDX airport. And the second
that's our predominant question, yeah.
The second one is what's going on with Hanjin shipping and what's the economic impact of that whole thing?
Two excellent questions. One being the more lighthearted, the PDX carpet. The replacement is ongoing. Every time I walk over to the terminal and grab a cup of coffee, I see more and more of the old stuff being replaced. I don't know, for those of you that have followed, we are recycling all of that through 4 vendors that have won requests for proposals. That we are turning over that carpet at no cost to us. We are essentially taking all the old carpet out. 4 vendors successfully proposed on it to do a plethora of things with it. They will cut it up into squares, they will turn it into bath mats, they will do, you can get all of your PDX carpet that you ever wanted through these 4 vendors that are going to do it. Right now we're about between 1/3 and 1/2 through the project itself. You'll notice as you go through the airport that quite a bit of it has been up and removed. The goal is to have all of it done by October, November timeframe this year to be completely changed out. On the serious one, on the Hanjin related question, that is a very good economic question, because right now they are the single carrier that carries about 80% of containerized goods through the Port of Portland. There's two others, Westwood and Hapag-Lloyd, but Hanjin is really our trans-Pacific carrier. The port is working with the terminal operator, ICTSI, to try and to recruit someone else to come to it. But to be honest, right now there's been some labor-related issues, and I'm sure most of you have followed that in the news, between the port or the terminal operator, ICTSI, and the ILWU. And until that is, our executive director makes no, Bill Wyatt makes no bones about this. Until that issue is resolved between those two, between the operator of the terminal and the ILWU, it's very unlikely that someone will come back in, because there have been, work-related issues associated with productivity and ships coming in. Ships follow a very specific schedule, ports of call. And when you come into a port and your productivity goes down and you're not being able to leave on the date that you have said so that you can make it to the next port, say to Tacoma or to Oakland, when that ship can't stay on its schedule, think about the ripples that happen when you're on an airliner and you miss your next connection. If they miss their next connection in the next port, if that happens too often, they will skip Portland, which is what they were doing. And that issue has to be solved. That issue of productivity on the waterfront has to be solved between the operator of the terminal and the ILWU. There was kind of a larger overarching thing, which was this whole, all ports on the West Coast were renegotiating their the PMA, the Pacific Maritime Association, were renegotiating their larger contract that operated all the ports up and down the West Coast. That was resolved here just a few months ago, or a month ago. This issue kind of laid underneath the carpet, so to speak, not to bring that old analogy back in, but kind of laid underneath that carpet. Now that issue has been resolved with the contract up for all ports up and down the West Coast, there's still this labor and terminal management issue to be resolved here. That until it does, it'll be very hard to bring somebody back in. So what's happening now is your goods that are normally coming to here to go, and the port is in many ways a net exporter of materials. Containers, though, were a net importer of things, obviously. But until things improve, things like wheat that was going out in containers as opposed to in bulk ships, or minerals or those types of things, that's all being rerouted and either having to be trucked up to someplace like Seattle, Tacoma, or down south. And it's just costing freight forwarders time and money. And it's an underlying hurt on the economy right now. But it is something we're trying to bring both sides. We're trying to bring both sides of the table to resolve that, so that we can help recruit and bring back in a new service too here.
Harry Bodine, forum member. Actually, my question just got stolen.
Oh.
However, a second operator just announced, I think it was Hapag-Lloyd.
Hapag-Lloyd.
They're going to skip us too, and so they've diverted ships. So now we're down to about 5% of our normal container business. What impact is this having on the Port of Portland's finances, and especially on the aviation side as pertaining to Hillsboro?
Good question. So yes, you're absolutely right. Wow, you do have very good questions. What we've heard from Hapag-Lloyd is so far they haven't suspended their service completely, but they have been suspending individual port calls, and kind of in that same analogy, in the ability not to get themselves in a scenario where they miss the next port. The next likely step is that they would suspend all service, and then you're down to Westwood, which is, like you said, essentially 5% of the business. The sides of the port from a financial perspective are, there's essentially a firewall between two sides of the port, between the aviation and the marine and industrial land side of the port. So if there were a reduction in aviation services at PDX, it would affect all of us on the aviation side. If there's a reduction or a change in services on the marine side, it affects that. There are some cross parts of the port that support both entities, whether you're talking maybe the finance department or the environmental department or the human resources department. But from the operating perspective on either side of the organization, there's very little crossover, and there's zero financial crossover between the two sides of the port. There is some insulation to the port to this changes in container traffic, because we went through this once before about a decade ago where an operator pulled out of the port, and it had big ripples through our organization. We went through a RIF and lost about almost 30 individuals to layoffs because we just didn't have the revenue coming in. That was one of the reasons that we successfully got an operator like ICTSI to come in and operate the terminal itself, because instead of relying on the individual containers that come in and go, they pay us a flat fee to operate the marine terminal, whether they pump one container through that terminal a year or whether they pump 1,000 or 100,000 containers through that terminal. They pay the port a fee to lease all those facilities and operate from us. Now, as you imagine, like any private business, if they are paying us revenue, or paying us an expense, they're going to be looking for revenue. We're worried, certainly, that they will have problems generating revenue if they don't have container companies coming in. But right now, there hasn't been, our goal has been to solve the labor issue, or help solve the labor issues and help bring back a container operator who will help them then with their revenue side of their problem. But for us right now, there's two separate sides of the port, and we're still gaining, they're still paying us the fees to operate those facilities, even though they've had an 80% reduction in the amount of container companies that come and go. It has no impact to Hillsboro Airport.
John McWilliams, thank you for being here. You're really providing a lot of really good information that we need to hear, so thank you for doing that. I have a couple of questions also, and if I can get them both in first.
Sure.
The first one is about our local corporate industries that we have here, Genentech and Intel. They're pretty close to Hillsboro, and so they produce materials that they ship elsewhere, but right now I think that they're sending them to the port, they're sending them to PDX. Is that correct? And why would they be doing that? Or is Hillsboro going to be able to handle that?
We looked at this with our last master plan. I'll try not to get too bogged down in it, but there's several components to that. One is the issue of cargo-related aircraft. And cargo aircraft generally want to be located at the airport where a larger airport, commercial service. And so most of the people like FedEx and those types of things, they're going to be flying large enough aircraft that Hillsboro Airport doesn't accommodate their types of operation. Now, the way FedEx or UPS works is they all fly into PDX, and then they have a system of feeder aircraft that go out to all these other entities. They fly into Corvallis, they fly into Eugene, they fly into Medford with a small single-engine aircraft that picks up the packages that day. In fact, they make several trips. And then they all feed back to PDX to meet the one flight that night that connects them back to their hubs. It makes very little sense for them to connect from Hillsboro back to PDX because it's such a short distance, surface transportation-wise, that we really don't accommodate cargo, and that we really don't see that. Cargo also is very intensive. It takes up a lot of ramp space. Those aircraft are relatively large and take up a fair amount of ramp space. So in our last master plan, cargo was really not identified as an issue for the future of Hillsboro Airport. I will say, however, we continue to hear from industries in Washington County and from Hillsboro specifically that as surface transportation between PDX and Hillsboro gets more and more difficult, they do want to try and find a solution. And some of them have been looked at, how can I move with an air cargo my high value units back and forth? And even in that scenario, it doesn't make sense because it's still not cost as effective as waiting in traffic right now or trying to go in an off hour to make that transition with their cargo. So there's just we're too close to a commercial airport like PDX, and the cargo operators really want to be at a facility like that that has more ramp space and can accommodate the larger aircraft. And right now, the paint threshold, so to speak, on surface transportation just hasn't reached that critical point.
Okay. Oh, thank you. So I'm going to jump in with one other, and that's and you kind of answered it, but there are some airports around the country because of major disasters that have happened that closed airport. So they closed PDX. Could a passenger plane land at Hillsboro, or is the runway too short?
The runway at Hillsboro is 6,600 feet in length, which is a little over 1.25 miles. It could certainly handle commuter type aircraft and those types of things, Horizon type service and those types of things in the future. The reality is, and this happens on any given day. Think about a winter snowstorm here that hits Portland. If there are delays associated with PDX and aircraft can't land on their normal schedule and they have to delay and they have to divert to somewhere, they don't go to Hillsboro, they go to SeaTac. And this is because they have the facilities to handle both the passengers, the passenger screening, and the amount of fuels that they need. And in fact, on any given day, if there's a disaster or a snowstorm in the Seattle area, there's a good amount of those aircraft that are diverting to PDX. So really they go to another commercial service airport, where Hillsboro really has importance and where we've tried to make this from a planning perspective, especially with Washington County and what the city is. If there were ever a natural disaster, an earthquake, the Cascadia subduction earthquake, Hillsboro has a 6,600 foot runway, which could accommodate most medium to smaller size transport aircraft. And I'll use a term, I don't know if everybody's from C-130 or something like that, something of that aircraft size and smaller. There's a lot of belief that the crossings of the Willamette will be compromised in one of those Cascadia subduction type of earthquake scenarios. You may not have all of them, but you may have some of the remaining crossings of the river. And Washington County may be more isolated than it is on any given daily basis. That's really when Hillsboro will have its role. It's not in the divert of commercial, it'll be in that divert of if there's a natural disaster and you need to get supplies in and injured patients out for transport to somewhere. Yes, sir.
Chris Leslie, board member. On the huge growth of the airport or Port of Portland, how large has the personnel grown?
For the port entirely or Hillsboro Airport?
You're so knowledgeable, you could give me both, I'm sure.
Well, the port has, because we are a self-funded organization, and like I said, we're very little, 3% of our revenue comes from the tax base, and 97% comes from users of our facilities. The port in general is very much like a private company in that there has to be a real good business case before we add on staff. So we have not grown significantly, and in fact, we operate Hillsboro Airport with a staff of essentially 6 individuals. Now, we get a lot of support from the larger port, in that we get a lot of support on things like our economics and our finance department and our environmental and our safety and those types of things. We use the resources and staff of that. But our actual number of people that we use to operate the airport on a daily basis is 2 operations people and 4 maintenance staff. So it's we run a very lean organization.
Thank you.
John Tyner, by disclosure, my wife was an assistant risk manager at the port. Now she's the risk manager.
And she was right in my same office area. And
exactly.
I see Donna on a daily basis, yes.
But as part of her risk management duties, she did the disaster type of things. And she has a lot of interesting things to say, and I didn't get it until you just said it right now. The west side is going to be disadvantaged in a number of different ways with the Cascadia subduction quake, which take down some, if not all, of the bridges, as you indicated. I don't want to be on the market when that happens, I'll tell you that. Tell me more about the disaster preparedness at Hillsboro as a center for essentially maintenance of commercial activity on the west side, because of course fuels on the east side, heavy vehicles, cranes, and everything like that is on the emergency personnel and all storage things. We run out of fuel within about 2 days for emergency services on the west side. If you have some ideas or knowledge of that, I'd be interested in hearing it.
Well, most of and it all depends on a lot of multiple things, but the fuel supply pipeline that supplies Portland and the west coast area here essentially terminates in the St. John's area. And so in a lot of ways, the west side may do perfectly fine if you can get a truck, if you can get fuel up and over through Forest Park and over and into Washington County in that distribution waste, because a lot of the fuel terminals are right down there in the Linton, St. John's area. So that's going to be a half dozen, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The real question is going to be what are each individual community being able to do, and what resources do you have on hand before national resources start arriving. And in that respect, the Port has been working with Washington County and Hillsboro for at least the last 10 to 12 years in identifying the airport and its role for natural disaster response. We realize that with a lean staff and 6 individuals, we're going to tap that out and run through those people very quickly. And so we've been working with the city and the county that they realize if they're going to need to get those resources in or injured people out, we may need to do sharing of resources. We may need to use city or county equipment or city or county personnel to help us to respond to that. And so one of the things that we did in that in that vein was about 5 years ago, the city was looking to establish a fire station in the vicinity of Hillsboro Airport. They were looking for land, they had a fire station they needed to build, they had a service area, they already had a demonstrated need for it. Well, we said, what about if you could put that on the airport? It would still be a city fire station, it would still 99% of the time serve the city, but you would have an access out the back of the station that would serve the airport if you chose to do that. And it took us a while to get the FAA on board with that, but we crafted that. So now we actually have a facility on the airport that can serve as a command post in the event of a natural disaster or emergency. It certainly has the fire and life safety and health resources associated with that. So the more that we can do to partner with Washington County, with the city of Hillsboro and the resources out here, we realize we're not going to be able to stand alone on our own, but we are going to need some partnership on that. Yes.
With your great indulgence, because we're running late, can we squeeze in 2 more questions? Sure. All right, if you guys could be brief, because we are over time. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Emily Neff, a member. What role does the Port play in the Hillsboro Air Show?
Other than we are a sponsor, which means we give them the airport, they lease the airport from us for the weekend. And so other than that, we have little role in the actual event. The event itself is run by the nonprofit. You know, many years ago, people are familiar, it ran with the Rose Festival and the Hillsboro Chamber of Commerce, and then it was taken over about 10 years ago by a nonprofit entity. So essentially what they do is they negotiate a use agreement of our facility for the weekend of their event, and we, with the approval of the FAA, allow them to move in and have their event and then clean up and move off. So yeah. For their right to put it on at the airport, one of the things they gave us was one of the sponsorship bills. We don't pay for the sponsorship, but that's what they give us as a result for that. Ms. Barnes.
I'm just real curious. This is just a question that came up, piggybacking off hers. What do they pay to lease the airport for the air show?
We develop an estimate of what that would cost to do that. And it's usually in the neighborhood, it's for the hours that it's impacted of operations, and I'd have to look up the exact number, but it's in the tens of thousands of dollars type of activity, and I'd have to get you an exact number. And what we've worked out is an arrangement of sponsorship and other types of things that they do, like they do with most others since they're nonprofit. They do an in-kind contribution is that. I'd have to get you the exact budget number.
Well, thank you. Now, could you tell me again, you mentioned it at the beginning, what is the mission of the port?
To enhance the transportation and access to markets for the regional area.
Okay, so that's pretty business oriented. It's always puzzled me, you know, at Troutdale and Hillsboro, the majority of operations are training flights and recreational flyers, the vast majority. So they seem to fall outside of the mission, the business mission of the port, that they're not really transportation, they're training. And many of the students are being recruited from outside the country. So I'm really wondering how that falls into the mission, particularly when Hillsboro is the largest emitter of lead in the state, and this generates enormous amounts of noise for people who are subjected to to the training? For instance,
No, I can answer. I can answer the question. The way that fits in with the role of the port is obviously you're going to need access to transportation for multiple markets, whether you're talking PDX or whether you're talking cargo service at PDX or airline service. Actually, I'd be happy to share this with anybody here as well. Boeing's Vice President for Commercial Aircraft came and gave a presentation to the Ports Commission about a year ago about this. And there's, I forget the exact statistics, but there's about a need in the next 30 years for about, I want to say it's close to 500,000 new pilots worldwide. Now, not all of that is in the US, and there's also Boeing, and Airbus has this same number she was saying, the delivery of aircraft. It's something in the neighborhood of 5,000 or 10,000 aircraft, and of that, it's split roughly 50-50 over the next couple of decades. The aircraft that are being delivered in Asia are all new deliveries. Those are all new countries that are bringing on commercial service and passenger service and cargo service. In the US, most pilots are like myself, or like most of you sitting in this room. We're either at very close to retirement age or at retirement age. And so there's an industry now associated with backfilling, like there's a problem with nurses, there's a problem with doctors, there's a problem with most technical professions now. And so we view flight training as one of those strategic things that's needed for this industry to keep going into the future, both domestically and internationally, because Portland is, of all the, I believe, I'm going to get this number wrong, I think it's 19 or so cities in the US that has both commercial service to both Europe and Asia. We're the only, there's like 20 markets in the US that have international service both directions. We are the smallest one of those. We are always on the cusp of losing that. But our role and our access to those, and those access to those other countries, and having those people come here is both great economically for our tourism, but also for our industries to be able to ship things back and forth, and for those executives to make that way back and forth. So the tie-in to flight training, which is a big entity for both Hillsboro and Troutdale, is that they have a direct impact on the future of aviation and commercial aviation and pipeline supply and all those types of things that helicopters do, and fishery spotting and forestry observations, all those types of things. We see that training, very much like the state's university system, is a direct is our contribution towards that.
Thank you, Mr. Nagy. Thank you for a wonderful presentation, and I'd like to thank you for staying a little extra. I appreciate that. I would like to thank the folks here that have also stayed after 1 o'clock, but I know I don't have to because it was the quality of the presentation and those questions that kept you guys in your seats. So we bring today's forum to a close, and as we do, with one more thank you to Mr. Nagy, please, next week starts the candidates. We have candidates coming, and boy are the candidates coming. And next week we will be dealing with the Hillsboro School District elections. Thank you, folks. We'll see you next Monday. Bye-bye.
Oh, they're great. And honestly, if you want to talk about this, happy to send you Sally, PDF, how are you? Email or good. Excellent.
What's great? My way toward getting set in the future. Having the powerful pushing it up against that's why I sat out. Wasn't less trouble. Hey, Rock one. I kept my eye on that one because that one had been